Okay, next will be philosophy, I guess. Philosophy. Finally found a copy of this baby. Sam Harris, The Moral Landscape. How Science Can Determine Human Values. Interesting. Let me give you the year, and I'll tell you a little bit about it, because I do know some things about it. This is 2010. 2010. Okay. So I did watch a speech by Sam Harris talking about this book, and he believes that he can come up with ethical theories, moral theory, without philosophy, and without religion, of course. He is part of the atheist movement, Sam Harris. He's one of the four horsemen, as it's called. Sam Harris, Dan Dennett, Christopher Hitchens, and Richard Dawkins. They're the four horsemen. That's a great line. There's actually a YouTube video of them talking around a table. You should look that one up, called The Four Horsemen, I think. So Sam Harris believes that we can do morals without philosophy by making one assumption. He starts with one assumption, and he thinks that, aha, I can start here, and I don't need any philosophy. Forget it. This is what he says. You can look up the speech yourself, too. I don't know if it's called, the video is called The Moral Landscape, but it's on YouTube, and I don't know what it's called. It's some speech he did. Actually, it might even be a TED Talk. I think it might be a TED Talk. He says here, all we have to do is conceive of, this is our first premise, that given the worst suffering possible, anything better than that is in the right direction, is where we need to be. That's how we start. That's how we construct our moral framework or moral landscape. Is we start with, we imagine what it might be like to suffer at the most you possibly can without dying, I guess. And then if we relieve any of that suffering by changing some kind of your behavior or whatever, you change your moral outlook on the world or whatever the person does, anything that reduces that suffering is going in the right direction. And so science can help with that, because science can determine what relieves suffering, like health, for example, nutrition, things like that. We can do studies about what kind of cultural practice does statistically to a culture, like, for example, genital mutilation. Does genital mutilation have a net happiness effect on a culture? Scientists can study that, and they can pop out a yes or no or a percentage or something, right? Or maybe does IQ, if you have low IQ, can you have cheap alcohol? Or should it be heavily taxed if you have low IQ to defer you from buying it or something? Versus if you have high IQ, then maybe you can tolerate, or you can be left to behave better or something, I don't know. Anyways, that's his premise. Now, philosophers are not going to like that, because he's already, that first premise that you can discuss and you can talk about whether that's valid. So he's not out of the gate on there, but it's an attempt, and I welcome it. So bring it on. I'll have a read, and I'll see if I like what he has to say. But I can't imagine that you could possibly get past that first premise, though. I can't imagine that you can do away with philosophy. That first premise is philosophy. And what science can contribute to that is also a philosophical question. So, but I'm glad that people write about it. I'm glad that I can see what they have to say. Here's what I got in the mail recently. What It Means to Be a Libertarian by Charles Murray. You may know Charles Murray. Human Accomplishment. What was the education one called that I read? That was a good one too. The Real Education, I think it's called. Real Education. He also co-wrote The Bell Curve, and he also wrote a really good one on welfare. I don't remember what it's called now. You just look him up, though, on Amazon. And did he write Coming Apart? I think he wrote Coming Apart. Anyways, he's a libertarian, although he says that he is a small L libertarian, meaning he's not full-on libertarian, freedom for everybody kind of stuff. But he certainly agrees with less government. And I wanted to know what his take on libertarianism was, because he says he's a small L libertarian. So I want to know what that means and what he what he means by that, where he draws the line, things like that. What else do I have to say about Charles Murray? He's got a lot of great videos on YouTube. There's some videos on him with the Hoover Institute that you can watch, and yeah, he's great. I can't think off the top of my head more on Charles Murray, but he is fantastic, and probably he would certainly be in my top 10 of influences, people that I think are great, and I enjoy their work, and I've learned a lot from their work. Here is Chinese Thought by H.D. Creel. It says from Confucius to Mao Tse-tung. And I wanted to hear more about Chinese thought. You may have seen my small series on Confucius, 2 parts. The Analects. I don't know why I said analytics. Forgive me. I have no idea why I said that. It is the Analects. But I want to know more about Eastern philosophy. Although, I guess it's hard to say. It's hard to call it Eastern philosophy, because it really doesn't have the same, and certainly Confucius, doesn't have the same structure as Western philosophy. Western philosophy is metaphysics, epistemology. Sometimes people use axiology for values, consider it separate, although other people don't agree that values are separate. How can you just discuss values without any conception of what reality is and what people are, what humans are? How can you possibly discuss axiology without those assumptions? So some people use axiology as a third branch, but other people would put it underneath metaphysics and epistemology. And then ethics comes from metaphysics and epistemology. What should one do? How should one live? And then from ethics comes politics. How should one live with others? Should we have a government? Things like that. Eastern philosophy does not really use that structure. It doesn't really have a structure, but that might be an ignorant opinion. I don't know if they have a structure. Confucius didn't really seem to have a structure. He just had nice and wise things to say. So I'm hoping that I get more from this in terms of what other people have said. It says Confucius to Mao. Let me just see who else is in here. This is written in 53. It says before Confucius, then Mao Zhu, Mencius, Taoism, and Buddhism. The influence of the West. That'll be interesting. Okay, that's what it says. So, I'm glad to have more about Chinese philosophy. Alrighty, here is The Right Thing to Do. Basic Readings in Moral Philosophy by James Rachels. He is a name. That's why I picked this up. James Rachels is a name. I don't know anything about Rachels, though, but I recognize the name. And I'm interested in moral philosophy, of course. Interestingly, and you're going to have to take my word for it, I had no idea who was in here, who was discussed in here. You may already know who I'm thinking of. But I looked through it the other day, and I was like, holy crap, they have a section on... So in part 2, it says the main philosophical theories about the nature of morality. So you could almost call this meta-ethics. So what is morality, right? And it's got here, chapter 7, The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. I had no idea that was in here, and I was thrilled because I didn't think Ayn Rand was really talked about very much, even in academia. But it's got here a piece on Ayn Rand, a little bit of a biography, and then it talks about her work and her point of view. And I haven't read it, so I don't know if it just presents it or if it's critical of it or something. But I thought that was great. And next to it is John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism. So that's wonderful. I'm glad that it's in there. And last for philosophy is, I already have a copy of this, but I just picked it up because it was a nice copy. Ayn Rand, Philosophy Who Needs It. If anyone is interested in philosophy and they don't have much knowledge on it, I would recommend that you read this for an introduction and more of a justification. But then next I would recommend you get a copy of Will Durant's The Story of Philosophy. Yes, it's called The Story of Philosophy. Read that one. It's a nice read. It's an easy read. I think everyone should probably read The Story of Philosophy. If nonfiction kills you, if you're one of those people, well, you won't be one of those people. You won't be watching this video. let's say you know someone that nonfiction kills them. There is a book written called Sophia's World that is a fiction. It's written like fiction, or it's written like a story, but also it has lots of philosophy in it, like explicit. And it's like the purpose of it is to teach you philosophy, the different views and all that. But it's written as a story, so if you know someone or you are a person who only likes fiction, then that's a nice one that you can start with that one too. Sophie's World by Gardner with 2 A's. Gardner with 2 A's. All right, I've got a couple on science. Here's a staple. The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. That's Kuhn. This is the 50th anniversary edition. I do not have a copy of this. I haven't read it. This is the 4th edition. This is, if you ever heard of paradigm shifts, this is the book they're talking about, Kuhn. I don't know if I want to. I have something to say about it, but it may be misguided and it may be terrible, maybe not right, but maybe I'll just say it anyways. And then if it's wrong, you can just criticize me in the comments. He talks about paradigms, and he mentions that science doesn't move in a linear fashion in terms of we just keep upgrading ourselves, kind of like leveling up or something. Science doesn't move like that. Science moves in terms of almost like you have a cloud, and move from cloud to cloud, and each of them have their own assumptions and their own evidence and their own facts, and even their own ways of getting facts. And we move from just different clouds rather than some linear progression. Now, I don't know anything more than that, because there are all kinds of what are the consequences to that kind of, if that's true or not, these paradigms. I don't know, but I don't want to say anything more. Okay, here is a strange find. I didn't think I'd see this anywhere. Foundations of Psychohistory by Lloyd DeMause. I don't know if you can see I'm getting reflections from the light. Lloyd DeMause, Psychohistory. How should I say? It is not mainstream. I think that's the best way to put it. He has a thesis, but I think it's very interesting. That he wrote also a book on the history of child abuse, something like that. But he believes that history moves via parenting practices. That how children are raised influences, to say determines would be too strong, but it influences and drives culture and drives progress. And so the better we are as parents, and that doesn't mean that you have children, but also just as a citizen, the better we will be as a civilized people. That is kind of the main, although he uses psychology to talk about it. So it's interesting, but it isn't, like I said, it isn't really mainstream, and I don't know how accurate it is, and how I don't know how successful he has been, really. It's a fringe. It is a fringe, but you should read all those things. Get a taste of everything, because there's always something to be learned. Okay, a little bit of politics.